Hi, I'm Mitz. Let's make everyone's favourite fire honey badger, Typhlosion. To start the sculpt off, I used foil for the main base of the body. This ended up making sure the sculpt was way lighter, and I ended up using way less clay when I was making it. Finishing the foil base, I covered it in a thin layer of super scuply, and then baked it, ready to start building up all the parts of the body. I then gave the piece a quick sanding just to make sure that any clay I added on top of it was going to stick the best it could. Then I moved on to adding the legs, which was just a ball of clay that I ended up cutting in half, sticking on the lower half of the sculpt. I then just kept moulding this around until I was happy with the overall shape of it. Just to make sure that the legs were sticking on the best they could, I ended up using a ball stylus just to really smooth out the edges, and then ended up going over the whole thing with a bit of isopropyl alcohol, just to make sure I was getting rid of all the fingerprints, making it nice and smooth.
No.
It came to this point looking at the footage that my Typhlosion was looking a bit on the aubergine side, so I ended up just sticking with it and trusting the process. To adding the arms, I realised, didn't record this at all, whoops. I did however quickly realise that his arms were looking a bit on the thin side, so I gave him a bit more clay just to beef out his muscles a little bit. Moving on to the feet, I ended up with 2 small discs of clay, cut out a few triangles, and I ended up with a fairly decent looking Typhlosion foot, or feet I guess, in my opinion.
No. No.
When it came to attaching the feet, I ended up using a really small ball stylus. Tried my best to just smush both sides together as best I could. I don't think this ended up the smoothest when I was finished with it, but it is what it is. After giving it a quick bake, I was ready to start moving on to the head. To do the head, I got a triangular piece of clay. I ended up smushing it into place on the neck and just kept moulding it around until I was happy with the overall shape of it.
Baby, you give me ice and fire.
When I was happy with the overall placement of it, I took some isopropyl alcohol, just kept blending out the edges until it was almost seamless.
You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body.
When I was happy with the shape of the snout, I took my blade and slowly started to chop out where I wanted the mouth to be. I then wedged it open a little bit so I could fit a ball stylus in there just to make his mouth a bit wider so I can add all the details inside. When I was happy with the shape of the mouth, I took a small oval piece of clay, put a line down the middle of it, and I made that the tongue, which I then put in, and you'll see it in the next clip. Moving on to the eyes, I took a small ball stylus and just sketched out the overall shape of them. I then took out some other clay tools and scooped out chunks of clay so that there was a bit of an indent, as I knew I was going to fill this in with some UV resin later on. For the blue fur on Typhlosion's back, I rolled out a thin sheet of clay and lightly stuck it to the back of the body. I then took my blade and cut it out into a shape that I was happy with. After cutting off all the excess bits that I didn't want, I went round the whole of the edge of the back fur and just smoothed out and blended it to the rest of the body to make it seem less thick.
Baby, you give me ice and
The teeth were made beforehand and baked so that I could easily just take them now, push them into place whilst the head was still unbaked.
baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite.
For his ears, I made smaller triangle shapes and stuck them in place on top of his head and blended them out when I was happy with the placement. For the weird bits of fur on Typhlosion's side, I cut out an almost lightning bolt shape and blended them into the main body and back fur using one of my silicone tools, a ball stylus and some more isopropyl alcohol. This was me attempting to make the flames out of what looks like metal Doritos. It completely didn't work, so I have no idea why I'm even showing you. What I really ended up doing was cutting out a bit of Typhlosion's neck and making this sausage shape that I then stuck in, almost like a neck pillow. And then I ended up using some triangular pieces of clay and just built them up until I was happy with the overall flame-like shape, if you will, around Typhlosion's neck. You might also see here in the next couple of clips that the tail is done. I'm not going to lie to you, I had no idea how I ended up making this. I ended up taking so long, in fact, that I ended up forgetting that I was even recording a video in the first place. So you're just going to have to try and imagine how I ended up doing that. Luckily, I can tell you here that I used this sharper tool I had to kind of get a really anime effect on the fire of Typhlosion's neck. After a final bake, I'm left with a fairly decent blank canvas. But before I wanted to start painting on it, I just made sure I gave it a quick sand to smooth out all of the edges, make the shape overall more pleasant to look at. This should also help the paint adhere to it. Before painting, I decided I need a base for the model to stand on. To do this, I cut out 2 circles of foam, then added some surface texture using some slicing and some jabbing with the leftover tinfoil I had. This gave it a nice rocky texture for the Typhlosion to stand on. After cutting out the second piece, I ended up sticking both pieces together so that I had enough strength on the base when I ended up adding our fairly decently sized Typhlosion. I also cut out the edges of both pieces of foam to blend them together a bit more, before then adding a rock on top that had a bit of a hole in it, which I used to kind of hide a little teaser for future videos, so keep your eyes peeled for that. After going to quickly paint my nails, I painted the whole base with a layer of grey Mod Podge mixture, which is just Mod Podge, black and white paint and a splash of water. I also found this helps keep the foam looking a bit less foamy in the end. Whilst the base dries, I was on to painting the Typhlosion itself. I started this with a base layer of white across the whole model. After making the white base coat, I moved on to the underside of the body, which I used a light beige colour for.
Yeah.
For the rest of his fur, I used a nice royal blue. This ended up looking a lot lighter on camera than it really is in person. For the flames, I predominantly used patches of yellow and orange. These were then blended together with a mixture of both the paints. The mouth ended up with a light pink and then a slightly lighter version of the same pink for the tongue. The eyes received another layer of the bright white used before. The main eye itself was some red with a black line in the middle of it.
No.
I also here added a nice bright white highlight just to make the eyes pop that little bit more before coating them in a nice bit of UV resin. For the base, I decided to incorporate some kind of lava or volcanic scene. To do this, I cut out a chunk of the middle of the base, painted it with a mixture of fiery colours, and then filled it with UV resin. Once the resin was cured, I went over some of the top of the lava with some light layers of dark paints, just to mimic that kind of crusty rock that you'd find on exposed lava in the real world. I then went around the base with some different browns and greys, just to add a bit of variation to the earth itself. Here you can see me using one of my clay tools just to poke some holes in some of the rock to mimic that porous texture that you might find in some real igneous rocks. Finishing off the base, I added some highlights using my fan brush. This was used with some lighter browns and greys, just to kind of make all of those surface textures pop.
No.
After sticking our fiery honey badger in place, it's time to see how we did. Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment future projects that you'd like to see made on this channel. If you haven't guessed already, I love my Pokemon theme project and would love to see this set of Johto starters finished, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see in the future. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.